Good morning, Shabbat Shalom once again. And once again, it is our privilege to spend a little time with our teacher and friend, Rabbi Hillel Silverman. Good morning, Hillel. How are you?
Shabbat Shalom.
It's wonderful to be together.
Good morning, Rabbi. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. This morning, we're reading the story of Shlach, which is the story of the spies. And thank you. Nice kippah there. That's really good. We have the story of the spies. So tell us what we should be looking for in this morning's Kriya.
Tomorrow, our Sedra this morning is Shlach Lecha. The children of Israel have crossed the Red Sea, and they are in the Midbar, in the wilderness, about a year, and they're close to the Promised Land. They could enter the Promised Land through the south. So Moses decides first to send in scouts. They're not spies, but they're scouts. He wants them to scout out the land, to tell of the fortifications there, whether the people are armed, and to come back and tell us if we are able to conquer them. So the scouts are there for 40 days. They return and they say it's a wonderful land. It's flowing with milk and honey of the land, and they bring on a pole. The inhabitants of the land are huge. They are giants. We'll never be able to defeat them. And they end up by saying, Vayehi ve'einenu kacharabim. And as we look at them, in our eyes, we were like grasshoppers. V'chein hayinu be'eineihem. And the Bible concludes, and so in their eyes, we also looked like grandpa. Now, how did they know that the other people viewed them as grasshoppers? And so our rabbis tell us that when we look upon ourselves as grasshoppers, that is exactly the way that others look upon us also as grasshoppers. If we feel we are insignificant, but we feel that we have no self-respect, then that is exactly how others would view us. I want to share with you an experience that I had when I was 17 years old. I was on the basketball team. Our star player was a guy named Guy McGahee. He was from a small town in Illinois. He was all-state basketball. His grandfather was also called Guy McGahee, and his father was Guy McGahee. So he was Guy McGahee III. And we were very friendly. And I remember so distinctly that we were wandering around in downtown New Haven looking for something to do. And we passed a dance hall, and there were young men, young women dancing. And I said, Guy, it looks good. Let's go in, we'll have a good time. He said, no, all the women look like they're Jewish. All the women look like they're Jewish. Now, what would you have done? I thought to myself, I'm going to show him and teach him a lesson. I lived an hour away in Hartford, Connecticut. We took a train on a Friday night. He came to our home, beautiful home. My mother was there, my two brothers and myself. We went to services with him on Friday night, and then we sat down to a Shabbos evening meal. And he loved the gefilte fish. He loved the knedlach. He loved the simmus. He loved the chicken. And I recall so well, and it was 80 years ago, when we all stood up, and he stood up tall and firm, and my father recited Kiddush. And then we came home, and believe it or not, he was a changed man. And I remember a few days later, he was counting his rosary. And I said, what's that? He said, it's a rosary. I count my rosary every time I play. I score more points that way. I said to myself, I'll show Guy McGahee. And I brought tzitzis with me. You know what Arba Kanfas are? It's in the Bible, the four fringes. Traditional Jews wear the tzitzis, the Arba Kanfas, underneath their shirt. And he said to me, it was under my uniform, he said to me, what is that? I said, these are Arba Kanfas, they're tzitzis, they're like the rosary. they're going to help me score more points. And he said to me, I don't think anything is going to help you score more. So that was my first experience of grasshopper theology. If you respect yourself, other people will respect you. My next experience was in Greenwich, Connecticut. I came to a congregation there, Temple Shalom. It was a very small congregation, and Greenwich was really the seat of anti-Semitism. You may remember the movie Gentleman's Agreement. There were few Jews there, and they were really not welcome and certainly not respected. The first night I was in Greenwich, I went with my wife Bobby to a diner, and we had some sandwiches for dinner, and I was waited upon by a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed young woman who was a student at Smith College. Being inquisitive, I said to her, we're moving to Greenwich now. Today's our first day. And tell us something about Greenwich. She said, sure. I was born and I was raised in Greenwich. It's a wonderful town. She said, but too many Jews are moving here. My first experience in Greenwich. Too many Jews are moving here. What would you have done? I said to her very simply, I'm Jewish. She said, well, many Japanese are also moving into Greenwich. I said to my wife, Bobby, at that time, she probably never saw a Jew in her life, so how could she respect them? I said, we are going to teach a lesson. We are going to educate the people in Greenwich and show them that Jews are people who respect themselves. And so next door to my synagogue was Christ Church, a beautiful, gorgeous Episcopalian church. And the Bushes, President Bush was a member there, the Bush family. I became friendly with their rector, Jack Bishop, and we began to play tennis together. We played once a week. He was a better tennis player than I was, but I remember the first time I won a set, he said to me, Hillel, that was not very Christian of you. We became very friendly. We occupied each other's pulpits. We took a group of our members to Israel, 67 pilgrimages, we call them. This was quite unusual back in the 60s, and we viewed Christian holy sites through their eyes, and they viewed Jewish holy sites through our eyes. We had a wonderful, wonderful time together. Returned to Greenwich. By the way, at the wall, I'll never forget this. The women were taught Israeli folk dancing by my wife Rabbi, and here they were in the plaza next to the wall, and they began to sing and dance the hora. And here they were, blue-eyed, blonde-eyed women with crosses around their necks doing the hora. The people looked at them in amazement. When we returned to Greenwich, we had an idea. Our two synagogues next to each other had two parking lots adjoining one another. And we thought to ourselves, let's have a ceremony and remove the parking, the boulders, the rocks. And so the television cameras there and the newspapers, we said our prayers and we removed the boulders. And now the two congregations were amalgamated. They used our parking lot on Christmas and Easter. We used their parking lot on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Another thing we did together, which was quite unusual, we went to the Board of Education and we said to them, Christians are excused from school from school on their holiday, and they don't attend school on Easter. We would love to have our children be exempt from taking classes on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Would you believe the Board of Education gave us a permission? No school scheduled to this day on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. When you are a grasshopper in your own eyes, you are a grasshopper in other eyes. Looking back in Jewish history, it's really a miracle how we Jews survived. 3,500 and more years ago in Israel, we were exiled and we began to wander for 100 years and more. For 2,000 years, we went to Assyria, and Babylonia and Persia and Rome and Spain and Poland and Nazi Germany, and we were humiliated many times. We were persecuted. We often wondered if we would be able to survive, but we were able to flourish in Babylonia, in North Africa, in Spain, in Europe, in Germany. We were able, through our institutions, our scholars, our philosophers, we were able by our traditions to survive. I'm not talking about arrogant bravado. I'm talking about modest self-respect. How did we do it? Well, I'm going to share with you a passage from the Talmud, from the Mishnah. These are the commandments which have no fixed measure. Lending the corner of our field to the poor, the gift of first fruits, loving acts of loving kindness, the study of the Torah, the fruits. These are, and then the Mishnah continues. These are the fruits of which a man can enjoy in this world, and they endure for all eternity. In other words, this is interest you receive from deeds, and the principle remains for the next world. And what are they? Honoring your father and your mother, performing deeds of loving kindness, attending the school morning and evening, hospitality to the wayfarers, dowering the bride, accompanying the dead to the grave, and making peace between man and his fellow man. But the study of the Torah is equivalent to all of them. These are the ethical and the moral ideals which Jews carried with them thousands of years through the Exodus, through the diaspora. Let's talk about the United States. We are a small group in the United States. We are just 2% of the population, which is nothing. And yet, the Jews have been in this country for maybe 150 years. Look what they have accomplished. In the Supreme Court, a people of 2% is represented by 33% members of the Jewish community. Congress and the House of Representatives and the Senate have 13% Jews of a 2% population. We have contributed in this country in such a great manner to industry, to science, to medicine, to literature, to physics, to philosophy, to biology. How did we do it? How did we make sure we would not be grasshoppers in the eyes of other people? Well, let's talk about Israel. 72 years ago in Israel, it was a country of 750,000 inhabitants, a very small country. Today, it is 8 million. Where did they come from? They came from the concentration camps. They came from Russia. They came from Ethiopia. They came from Germany and England and the United States. And look how they were able to survive for 72 years. There was the War of Liberation in 1948. I remember that distinctly. I was there. Small country, surrounded by and attacked by 5 Arab nations: Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and they were able to throw back the enemy in 30 days. The world thought that there would be another Holocaust, that all of the Jews of Israel, 750,000, would be thrown into the Mediterranean, but they were able to conquer and survive. There was a ceasefire, and then a war went on for another month. And then 19 years later, there was the 6-day war. Some of you may remember it distinctly. Egypt and Syria threatened to attack. The world did very little to protect the sovereignty of the Jewish people. I remember that Sunday night we went to bed. Monday morning we turned on the television. The war was over. In 6 days, the war is still studied as a tremendous tremendous military lesson. They were able to preempt an attack on the Egyptian Air Force. The war was over on Monday. On Wednesday, they conquered Jerusalem and the West Bank. On Friday, they climbed straight up to the Golan and conquered the Golan. And now, 6 years later, another war, the Yom Kippur War. Imagine of people surviving the Yom Kippur War. We were at services, and we heard all of a sudden the news. And in Israel, the Israelis went out of the synagogue in their talis, holding a siddur and vowing to defend themselves, which they did. It was a longer war. It was 3 weeks. Now, how did it happen that Israel was able to survive with so little equipment and so little military knowledge all these years? Well, it was the people. The people were a sabra. You know what a sabra is? A native-born Israeli is a sabra. A sabra is a cactus plant. It has prickers on the outside, hard to get to the middle, but in the middle is sweet fruit. And the sabras were determined. They had willpower. They had self-respect. They had the possibility of achieving their goals and their generation. The sabra today is an amateur president. He's an amateur archaeologist. He's an amateur government official. He has the willpower to succeed and to survive. And that is the way that Jewish people were able to survive. They respected themselves. They were not grasshoppers in their own eyes. And Israel today has so much for which to be grateful. A population of 8 million, industry, startups. I read in the paper every week, a new Israeli startup has been purchased by an American company for millions, even billions of dollars. They have achieved so much in science, in medicine, in development, in invention. Israel has self-respect. Israel has self-fulfillment because she has given so much. The Jewish people really have given so much to the world. They've given a Bible and a Talmud, ideology, theology, philosophy, music, art, literature. We should respect ourselves as Jews. The Bible was so correct